One of the most interesting careers of any director has to go to that of Sam Raimi. Whenever you look at his filmography, it seems to be extremely unbalanced between things that you would think of as more so mainstream, a lot of superhero stuff. He made the original Spider-Man, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, all the stuff that you see and you would think that seems pretty standard and mainstream. But then you see a lot of his other stuff and, well, he has some strange stuff in there too. Sandhelp falls somewhere in between these two categories. It's definitely interesting that he could make a film like Multiverse of Madness just 4 years ago and then move on to something like this, which is very much more independent, though it does have a decent budget and a pretty A-list cast. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like a mainstream movie. It's not a franchise. It is being released by Disney technically, but it doesn't have that feeling of franchise schlock. Instead, this movie is its own original idea and thriller, though you can tell by the trailer and the general concept of it that it is very derivative of a lot of other movies, namely Alvin and the Chipmunks 3 Chipwrecked. The general premise is that two people, a boss and an employee, are stranded on this deserted island, and it's about the tension that comes between them and how they essentially interact with each other whenever their roles are reversed. I think the performances in this are probably the best aspect. Both Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien do a good job of keeping these performances up because the movie relies a lot on them selling these emotions. The directing is also good in this, but the biggest issue, which could have easily been solved, is the island itself. Now, in a movie like this, when there's two people or one person stranded on the island is usually going to make up a third or second main character by how it looks, by a lot of the flora and fauna. Think of something like Castaway. The island in that is a character in of itself. It's shot well, it looks very comforting, but at the same time dangerous, and it adds a lot to the movie. In this, instead of shooting on an actual island, you can clearly tell that this was green screened, and it looks so much worse because of it. If we had gotten this movie, but on an actual island where you could tell that they were actually interacting with the different elements of the island, then this would look so much better and it would feel so much smoother. It would really add to that independent, homemade feel that this movie is so desperately trying to capture. Instead, it sometimes leans more into feeling like a typical studio thriller because of that. You got the derivative plot, the typical bad CGI and mediocre green screen effects, and a very predictable plot in general. However, it's not all bad. It's still a pretty enjoyable movie because of that central dynamic between the two main characters. It's an interesting thriller because you see the power dynamic shift, and there's a lot of interesting tension and pretty fun situations and dialogue that come out of this role reversal. The third act is also pretty fun too. It gets a little more intense and action oriented, and though a lot of people would probably argue that a couple of the final reveals jump the shark, this movie was already pretty silly to begin with, so I can overlook that. Overall, Sandhelp is a pretty decent time, but hey, that's just what I thought. Feel free to tell me what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.